Blood stained the marble floors when Matteo Lombardi banished the only woman who ever truly saw his soul. "Take nothing of mine," the ruthless boss commanded, stripping her of everything. He thought he was exacting perfect vengeance, entirely unaware she already carried the one thing he couldn't survive losing. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Lombardi estate, mirroring the violent storm brewing inside the grand foyer. Hazel Brooks stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She was a large woman, proudly fat, with generous curves that she had spent a lifetime learning to love, and soft, wide hips that Matteo used to pull himself against in the dark, desperate hours of the night. Her weight had always made her feel grounded, immovable, yet standing before the boss of the Chicago syndicate tonight, she felt as fragile as spun glass. Matteo Lombardi stood by the grand staircase, his usually immaculate tailored suit completely ruined by the blood of Hazel's brother. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and his piercing, icy grey eyes that usually softened when they dragged over Hazel's thick thighs and full stomach, were now devoid of any human warmth. He was the devil incarnate in this moment, a predator who had just discovered a rat in his sanctuary. "You knew," Matteo's voice was dangerously low, vibrating with a lethal cadence that made the armed guards in the room stiffen. "Matteo, please, I didn't," Hazel pleaded, her voice cracking. She took a step forward, the heavy silk of her designer gown, a gift from him, meant to drape elegantly over her plus-size figure, rustling in the suffocating silence. "Caleb is an idiot. He's an addict. I had no idea he was skimming from your shipments. If I had known, I would have stopped him. I would have come to you." "You expect me to believe that?" Matteo sneered, closing the distance between them with slow, predatory steps. "Your brother steals $500,000 of my product, tries to sell it to the Russian syndicate. And you, the woman who sleeps in my bed, the woman I trusted over my own captains, knew absolutely nothing." "It's the truth." Tears spilled over Hazel's flushed cheeks. She reached out, her plump, shaking fingers, brushing against his solid chest, desperate for the man who had whispered reverent praises against her skin just the night before. Matteo flinched at her touch, as if she had burned him. He grabbed her wrist, his grip bruising. For 6 months, they had lived in a secret world. To the estate, she was just the head chef, a woman whose culinary genius kept the Lombardi Empire fed. But behind closed doors, she was his obsession. He had worshipped her body, treating her stretch marks like scripture, and her softness like the only peace he had ever known in his violent life. Now that same man looked at her as if she were dirt beneath his expensive leather shoes. "Your brother dies tonight," Matteo stated, his voice devoid of emotion. Hazel gasped, dropping to her knees. The impact sent a painful jolt through her heavy frame, but she didn't care. "No, Matteo, I beg you. Punish him. Break his legs. Banish him. But don't kill him. He's all the family I have left. Please, for what we mean to each other, spare him." A cruel, twisted smile touched Matteo's lips. "What we mean to each other? You were a distraction, Hazel. A soft place to land. Did you really think you meant more to me than my empire? Then respect." He let go of her wrist and stepped back, disgusted. "Tobias," he barked to his lieutenant standing in the shadows. "Take Caleb to the docks. Make it slow." "No!" Hazel screamed, trying to scramble forward, but 2 of Matteo's men grabbed her arms, hauling her heavy frame backward. Matteo looked at her, struggling, his jaw clenched tight. The betrayal stung him deeper than he would ever admit. He had let this woman see his vulnerabilities. He had bought her diamonds, draped her in silks that complemented her beautiful, unapologetic size, and she had repaid him by conspiring with her junkie brother, or so his twisted, paranoid mind believed. "Throw her out," Matteo ordered, turning his back on her. "Matteo, wait, please," Hazel sobbed, struggling against the guards. Matteo paused, glancing over his shoulder. His eyes raked over the diamond necklace resting against her collarbones, the expensive silk dress, the ruby ring on her finger. "Actually, wait." He walked back to her, his expression turning to stone. "Take it off." Hazel blinked through her tears, confused. "What?" "The jewelry, the dress, everything I paid for. Take nothing of mine," he commanded, his voice echoing in the cavernous hall. "You leave this house with exactly what you brought into it. Nothing." The humiliation hit her harder than a physical blow. Surrounded by his men, Hazel was forced to strip off the diamonds. She was led to the servants' quarters, where she changed into the faded, stretched-out sweatpants and oversized t-shirt she had worn on her very first day of work. She left behind the designer coats, the imported shoes, the credit cards. As she was shoved out of the heavy iron gates into the freezing Chicago rain, Hazel wrapped her arms around her thick waist, shivering uncontrollably. The cold seeped into her bones, but it was nothing compared to the ice forming in her heart. She placed a trembling hand over her lower belly. Just that morning, she had taken a test. 2 pink lines. She had spent the entire day figuring out how to tell the most dangerous man in the city that he was going to be a father. She had imagined his rough hands gently resting on her full stomach, his promises to protect them. Now, standing in the torrential downpour, with absolutely nothing to her name, Hazel made a vow. He had told her to take nothing of his. He was wrong. She was taking the only thing that mattered, and she would make damn sure Matteo Lombardi never found out about the heir growing inside her. 5 years later, the bell above the door of Sweet Crumb Bakery chimed, cutting through the warm, vanilla-scented air. Hazel wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron, blowing a stray strand of hair out of her face. At 28, she had grown even more comfortable in her skin. Her body was lush, strong, and deeply maternal, carrying the physical evidence of her hard work and her immense love for her son. "Be right with you," Hazel called out from behind the display case, carefully arranging a fresh tray of blueberry scones. Portland, Maine was a lifetime away from the bloody streets of Chicago. Here, she wasn't the disgraced lover of a mafia kingpin. She was just Hazel, the cheerful, heavy-set baker who made the best cinnamon rolls in the county. It had been a brutal climb. She had scrubbed floors, worked triple shifts in diners, and saved every penny, while her ankles swelled and her back ached through her pregnancy. But it was all worth it when she looked at the back corner of the bakery. Sitting at a small wooden table, swinging his short legs, was 4-year-old Leo. He was currently frowning deeply at a coloring book, a dark, intense scowl on his small face that made Hazel's breath catch every single time she saw it. Leo had Hazel's soft, curly brown hair and her dimpled cheeks. But his eyes were the exact icy, piercing grey of the devil she had left behind. Even the way the boy concentrated, his jaw locked in stubborn determination, was a haunting echo of Matteo Lombardi. "Mummy, the green crayon is broken," Leo announced, his voice demanding but sweet. "Use the blue one, my little bear. Trees can be blue if you want them to be. Hazel smiled warmly, walking over to press a kiss to his forehead. As she walked back to the counter, she finally looked at her customer. A tall man in a dark, expensive overcoat was staring at her. Hazel's blood instantly ran cold. The warmth of the bakery vanished, replaced by a phantom chill of a Chicago storm. It was Tobias. Mateo's right-hand man stood perfectly still, his eyes wide as they darted from Hazel's face, down to her flour-covered apron, and then, slowly, toward the corner of the room. Hazel shifted her large body, deliberately blocking Tobias's line of sight to Leo, her maternal instincts flaring like a lioness protecting her cub. "Hazel," Tobias whispered, genuinely shocked. He had been sent to Portland to launder money through a real estate developer. Stopping for a coffee had been a completely random twist of fate. "We thought you were dead. After your brother." "What do you want, Tobias?" Hazel interrupted, her voice steady despite the violent trembling of her hands. She stood tall, using her broad shoulders and wide frame to shield her son. "I have nothing to do with that life anymore. I live quietly. I bother no one." Tobias took a step closer to the counter. "The boss. Mateo hasn't been the same since you left. He's unhinged. He wiped out the Russians, the Irish. He burned the city down looking for a ghost." "He told me to leave," Hazel snapped, her eyes narrowing. "He made his choice when he murdered my brother and threw me out in the rain. Tell him nothing, Tobias. If you ever had an ounce of respect for me, you will walk out that door and forget you saw me." "Mommy, look, a blue tree." Leo suddenly hopped off his chair, running up to Hazel and tugging on her apron. Hazel's heart stopped. She tried to push Leo behind her legs, but it was too late. Tobias looked down. The hardened Mafia lieutenant froze completely. He stared into the 4-year-old boy's face, staring directly into the unmistakable, chilling grey eyes of his boss. The resemblance wasn't just close, it was undeniable. The boy was a miniature Matteo Lombardi. Tobias swallowed hard, stepping back. He looked at Hazel, a complex mix of terror and pity crossing his face. "Hazel, what have you done?" "Leave," Hazel growled, grabbing a heavy cast-iron rolling pin from beneath the counter. "Get out of my shop." Tobias didn't say another word. He turned on his heel and rushed out into the cold Maine morning, the bell jingling cheerfully behind him, a sickening contrast to the dread sinking into Hazel's stomach. She dropped the rolling pin, scooped Leo into her arms, and buried her face in his neck, breathing in his sweet, childish scent. They had to run. They had to pack everything tonight. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles away, in a dark, smoke-filled office in Chicago, Matteo Lombardi sat behind his mahogany desk, swirling amber liquid in a crystal glass. The empire was his. Every enemy was dead. Yet the victory tasted like ash. He was a hollow shell, haunted by the memory of soft curves, warm laughter, and a betrayal that still bled fresh every night. His cell phone buzzed on the desk. A text message from Tobias. Matteo picked it up, his eyes half closed in exhaustion. But as the image on the screen loaded, his heart physically stopped beating in his chest. It was a blurry photo, taken hastily through a bakery window from across the street. It showed a large, beautiful woman with curly brown hair holding a little boy. Matteo zoomed in off the boy's face. The phone slipped from his fingers, shattering the crystal glass on the desk. He didn't notice the whiskey spilling over his expensive paperwork. He didn't feel the glass cutting his hand. Those were his eyes looking back at him. "Giovanni," Matteo's voice ripped through the silent office. a guttural roar of a wounded beast waking from a 5-year slumber. "Get the jet ready, now! We're going to Maine." Panic consumed Hazel as she tore through the small, dimly lit apartment situated directly above her bakery. Adrenaline masked the heavy ache in her lower back as she hauled a massive canvas duffel bag onto her unmade mattress. Her large, capable hands shook violently while she shoved Leo's tiny winter coats, her own thick woolen sweaters, and a worn envelope containing exactly $12,000 in emergency cash into the bag. She'd spent the last 5 years preparing for this exact nightmare. She had even paid a local Portland fixer, a quiet, paranoid man named Arthur Higgins, who operated out of a rusted trailer park in Cape Elizabeth, to create completely backstopped identities for them. "Mummy, why are we packing my dinosaur toys?" Leo asked, his small hands clutching a plastic T-Rex. He stood in the doorway of the bedroom, his dark brows knitted together in a scowl that made Hazel's chest physically ache. It was a terrifying mirror image of the Mafia boss, who was undoubtedly already hunting them. "We are going on a surprise vacation, my sweet bear," Hazel lied, forcing a wide, reassuring smile that didn't reach her terrified eyes. She walked over, her soft, full hips swaying, and knelt in front of him, pulling his small, sturdy body against her lush chest. "We are going to go see the snow in Canada. Won't that be fun?" Leo nodded slowly, though his sharp, calculating grey eyes that held far too much awareness for a 4-year-old, studied her trembling lips. Downstairs, the heavy deadbolt of the bakery's back entrance shattered with a deafening crack. Hazel gasped, snatching Leo into her arms with a sudden, fierce burst of maternal strength. She backed into the furthest corner of the bedroom, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs. Heavy, deliberate footsteps echoed on the wooden staircase. Each thud sounded like a death knell. She looked around frantically for a weapon, her frantic gaze landing on a heavy brass lamp. She set Leo down behind her wide frame, shielding him completely with her body, and grabbed the lamp, raising it high. The bedroom door didn't just open, it was kicked off its hinges, the splintered wood crashing onto the cheap linoleum floor. Matteo Lombardi stood in the doorway, consuming all the oxygen in the room. He wore a bespoke charcoal Brioni overcoat, his broad shoulders blocking out the dim hallway light. The brutal Chicago winter seemed to cling to him, radiating a chilling, lethal aura. His dark hair was slightly disheveled from the private flight out of O'Hare, but it was his face that made Hazel's blood freeze. He looked older, harsher. Deep lines framed his cruel mouth, and his eyes were hollowed out. Feral and desperate. For a long, suffocating moment, the undisputed king of the Chicago underworld just stared at her. His gaze dragged hungrily over her body. She was heavier now, her curves even more pronounced, her waist thick and soft, her breasts full and heavy beneath her worn flannel shirt. To Matteo, she was a goddess rising from the ashes of his ruined life. The sheer, overwhelming relief of seeing her breathing, alive, and right in front of him almost brought the ruthless killer to his knees. "Hazel," Matteo breathed, his voice a raspy, broken whisper. He took a slow step forward, his hands twitching at his sides, as if he wanted to reach out and pull her into his chest, to bury his face in her soft neck, and breathe in the vanilla and sugar scent that had haunted his nightmares for 5 agonizing years. "Don't take another step, Matteo," Hazel warned, her voice trembling but loud. She gripped the brass lamp tighter, her knuckles turning white. "I will crack your skull open." I swear to God, I will do it. Matteo stopped, his eyes flashing with a mix of pain and dark amusement. You always were fierce, he murmured. Put the lamp down, Hazel. I'm not here to hurt you. I came to bring you home. Home? Hazel let out a bitter, bordering on hysterical laugh. You threw me out in a thunder. Matteo! You stripped the clothes off my back and told me to take nothing of yours. This, she gestured wildly to the tiny, cramped apartment, is my home. You have no jurisdiction here. Before Matteo could issue another command, a small figure peeked out from behind Hazel's thick thigh. The air in the room shattered into a million jagged pieces. Matteo stopped breathing entirely, his icy grey eyes locked onto the 4-year-old boy. Leo stared back, completely unfazed by the giant, intimidating stranger, crossing his small arms over his chest in a defiant stance that was entirely Lombardi. "Who are you?" Leo demanded, his high-pitched voice ringing in the silent room. Matteo's mouth fell open slightly. The ruthless Mafia boss, a man who had ordered the executions of dozens of men without blinking, felt a hot, blinding tear slip down his cheek. He slowly fell to his knees on the ruined floor, ignoring the wooden splinters piercing his expensive trousers. He looked at the boy's dark hair, his stubborn jaw, his grey eyes. It was like looking at a ghost of himself, untainted by blood and sin. Matteo choked on the word, his hands trembling violently as he reached out toward the empty space between them. I am your father. Don't you dare! Hazel screamed, dropping the lamp and dropping to her knees to shield Leo from his view. He is not yours. You lost the right to him when you murdered my brother and threw me away. You don't get to claim him now. Matteo's head snapped up, his eyes hardening into flint. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by the lethal predator Hazel had fallen in love with. He is my blood, Matteo growled, his voice vibrating with absolute authority. And I am taking both of you back to Chicago tonight. You can fight me, Hazel, but you will lose. I would rather die, she spat back, wrapping her arms securely around her son. That can be arranged for everyone else in this city. A new, cold voice echoed from the bottom of the staircase. Matteo froze. He instantly recognized the heavy, metallic click of an automatic weapon chambering around. It wasn't one of his men. In his desperate, blind rush to get to Maine, he had broken his own security protocols. He had flown out of Chicago without a full guard, acting on pure, frantic emotion. And his enemies had followed him. Footsteps thundered up the wooden stairs, heavy, calculated, and terrifyingly fast. Matteo's instincts, honed by decades of survival in the brutal mafia underworld, took over instantly. He lunged forward, grabbing Hazel by her thick hips and throwing his entire body weight against her, shoving her and Leo into the small master bathroom, just as a spray of bullets tore through the drywall. The deafening roar of automatic gunfire shredded the apartment. Plaster exploded in a cloud of white dust, burying the packed duffel bag and shattering the bedroom window. Stay down, Matteo roared over the gunfire, pinning Hazel and a screaming Leo against the cold porcelain of the bathtub. He drew a heavy, matte black Glock 19 from his shoulder holster, his eyes burning with a lethal, demonic fury. "Who is that?" Hazel shrieked, covering Leo's ears with her wide hands, her own body acting as a human shield over her trembling son. "The Moretti Syndicate," Matteo grunted, risking a glance around the shattered doorframe. "They must have tracked the tail number on my private jet. They've been waiting for me to slip up and leave my compound unprotected. You brought a war to my home, Hazel cried, tears of pure terror streaming down her face. All her hard work, her safety, her entire quiet life in Portland was literally being shot to pieces. Matteo didn't answer. He leaned out of the bathroom, firing 3 rapid, precise shots into the hallway. A heavy thud and a gargled scream confirmed one of the hitmen had gone down. But there were more. 2 men stepped into the destroyed bedroom, their weapons raised. "Matteo, look out!" Hazel screamed. Matteo spun, firing, but a bullet caught him in the left shoulder. The impact threw him backward into the bathroom wall, blood instantly blooming across his expensive charcoal coat. He gritted his teeth, suppressing a groan of agony, and fired twice more with his good arm. The 2 hitmen collapsed onto the ruined floor, dead before they hit the ground. Silence, thick and suffocating, fell over the apartment, broken only by the wailing of police sirens in the far distance, and Leo's soft, terrified sobs. Matteo slumped against the bathroom doorframe, his breathing shallow, clutching his bleeding shoulder. He looked down at Hazel, his grey eyes softening as he saw that she and his son were completely unharmed. Did they hit you?" Matteo choked out, sliding down the wall until he was sitting on the floor, his face pale. Hazel stared at the blood pouring from his shoulder, her anger warring with the deep, buried love she still harbored for the man. Cursing under her breath, she grabbed a thick white towel from the rack and pressed it hard against his wound. Matteo hissed in pain but leaned into her touch, his head falling against her soft, heavy breasts. "You're an idiot," she sobbed, pressing the towel harder. "You came here to ruin my life again, and now you're going to bleed to death on my bathroom floor." "I didn't kill him," Matteo whispered, his voice fading. He reached up with a blood-stained hand, gently cupping her tear-streaked cheek. His thumb brushed over her soft skin. Hazel froze. "What? Your brother?" Matteo coughed, wincing. "Caleb. I didn't kill him, Hazel. I told you I did, because my pride was wounded, because you lied to me. But I couldn't put a bullet in the only family you had. I had Tobias smuggled out of Chicago. He's been living in Switzerland at the Paracelsus Recovery Clinic. I've paid for his rehab for 5 years." Hazel's breath hitched, her wide eyes staring into his face, searching for a lie. She found none. The crushing weight of grief she had carried for half a decade cracked, letting in a blinding ray of shock and relief. Caleb is alive, clean and sober." Matteo nodded weakly. He looked at Leo, who was peering out from behind Hazel's large frame, staring at the blood with wide eyes. "I banished you because the syndicate was falling apart. A war was coming. I thought if you had my money, my protection, you would be a target. I stripped you of everything, so my enemies would think you meant nothing to me. It was the only way to keep you alive. I didn't know you took my heart with you." Hazel stared at the ruthless Mafia don, seeing the broken, desperate man beneath the blood and bravado. He had sacrificed their love to save her life. "Mummy," Leo whispered, reaching out to touch Matteo's knee. "Is he going to die?" "No, little bear," Hazel said fiercely, her jaw setting into a stubborn line. She grabbed Matteo's suit jacket, hauling him upward with the formidable strength of a woman who lugged 50-pound bags of flour every morning. "He is too stubborn to die." Matteo leaned heavily against her lush, sturdy frame, groaning as she helped him to his feet. Hazel, come back to me. Let me protect you. Both of you. Listen to me, Matteo Lombardi, Hazel said, her voice steel. She looked him dead in the eyes, no longer the terrified girl he had banished, but a queen in her own right. I am not hiding in your mansion. I am not playing your secret mistress. If we walk out of this alive, I am your equal. We do this on my terms, or you never see your son again. Understand? A slow, bloody smile spread across Matteo's face. He looked at the fierce, beautiful, plus-size woman holding him up, and then at the fierce little boy standing by her side. His family. His empire. Yes, my queen, Matteo whispered reverently. Whatever you want. Just let me come home. The blood spilled in Chicago ultimately paved the road to a fiercely protective love in Maine. Hazel proved that true strength isn't about fitting a mold, but commanding respect on your own terms, forcing a ruthless mafia king to finally bend the knee to his queen. Did you love this intense, emotional conclusion? Please like this video, share it with your fellow romance drama lovers, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling stories. Tell us below, what was your favorite twist?